Hello, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And welcome to Impossible Mission here on the Geek Show. And today we're talking about a really interesting one. We're not doing a full month of horror this month, but we will be doing the back 2 weeks on horror, with it being Halloween and Halloween being the season of horror. And in this first one, kind of simple. Horror games for kids.
Yes. See, this is a topic that I think we've both wanted to talk about for a while, because when you get right down to it, horror is viewed as very much an adult, mature thing for older teens, for adults.
Now it is.
But back in the early days of the PlayStation and stuff like that, you had some really interesting games come out, and on the PlayStation 2, you had some really interesting games come out.
But before let's remove games out of it for a second. I want to talk about movies, because I grew up with a lot of the hangover from 1980s cinema, and a lot of 1990s cinema for that matter. And that era of movies, American movies in particular, they looked at movies for kids, not as things to keep them quiet and placate them and put them in front of the TV or punk them in the cinema and make them quiet for 90 minutes like they are now.
Yeah.
Movies then were not afraid in the slightest to scare kids, to show kids gross stuff. Kids love getting scared. Kids love gross stuff. But things for kids since the turn of the 21st century, kids' games become much, 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 much cleaner and much more sanitized. And video games have never really had that point where they looked at kids not as just, let's throw some dumb platformer their way, but let's freak them out. And I think video games for kids, as the horror video games for kids, is just such a missed boat.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the fundamental things here, because you used to have really interesting, when you talk about movies like The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Neverending Story, stuff like that, didn't pander to kids, didn't patronize them, just tried to tell a story.
Hell, even Goonies, for God's sake, Rob.
Yeah. I mean, Goonies had some great aspects to it. Do you remember Monster Squad?
Yes.
Where you had basically a bunch of kids up against the Universal monsters.
What was that other one? The witch one called from the 1990s? Oh, this is... Sarah Jessica Parker was one of the... I think. Was she? Hocus Pocus.
Oh, right, yeah.
Hocus Pocus is like...
Hocus Pocus.
Is a kids' movie through and through, but it's not scared. It's not afraid to scare kids. One of my favourite childhood movies, The Witches, Roald Dahl's The Witches, even though it does sort of swerve the ending and give it a bit of a happier ending than it probably does. Well, no, not probably, than it does in the book. It's still the whole sequence with the Grand Witch still frightens me to this day.
Oh, God, yeah.
But I adore it for that, and games haven't had that.
No, they haven't had that for a long time. I mean, it used to be, you used to get, all sorts of bizarre games like Panic and Veil of Darkness and stuff like that. And this, I think, was before the age ratings came in. And so kids were playing these weird games that nowadays probably kids wouldn't have access to. But back then, there wasn't really any limitations on what we were playing. But this is the thing, we had access to some very mature storylines, some very mature games, I
don't think maturity is the problem. I mean, you can have immature games. I think the one holdout of this sort of game is from Nintendo, ironically.
Yeah.
Because Nintendo, for a lot of people, they look at them and say, it's just mascot games for kids, blah, blah, blah. But Luigi's Mansion is the last holdout of this sort of game.
Yeah, I
won't say it's like designed to scare kids, but... it's kind of like goofy Halloween fun time. American Halloween isn't about sort of scary stuff. It's about going door to door and dressing in spooky outfits. It's campy. Halloween is campy. And that's the sort of thing which Luigi's Mansion is tapping into. But even in that level, it's kind of alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at scary games for kids, if you look at horror games for kids, I mean... if you go back to, say, Heart of Darkness or Evil Twin or something like that.
Yeah, they were like failed experiments, weren't they?
Yeah. They were trying to lay out a model for what kids' games could be like. And these are games that, that are approaching video games in a very interesting way. But then you kind of move on from there. The modern equivalent to something like Heart of Darkness or Evil Twin would be something like Yomawari Night Alone or Midnight Shadows.
But they're like super obscure.
But yeah, exactly, they're super obscure. But the thing is, Yomawari is a game franchise that probably you wouldn't buy for your kids anyway, because the age ratings are like 15, 16, something like that.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? Just on that point, people will buy the kids Assassin's Creed and Grand Theft Auto, and it's no problem. Yeah. But something like Yomawari Night Alone, if that was a bit more of a mainstream property, it's like, oh no, horror. Can't have horror for kids. Oh, no. It'll mess them up.
Yeah.
But I think Assassin's Creed and GTA, fine. Don't matter.
Yeah. If you look,
what weird double standards.
It is weird double standards. I mean, you had an old DS game called Teenage Zombies Invasion of the Alien Brain Thingies, which was kind of a bizarre comic book-esque type thing.
Well, it sounds like a goofy Saturday morning cartoon.
That's exactly how it played out. It was basically a bizarre, goofy Saturday morning cartoon type game.
Well,
a lot of the horror aspect was downplayed in favour of humour.
I mean, jumping over to the TV realm again, Gravity Falls, this fills that gap.
Yeah.
This fills a gap where it's not afraid to scare kids. I mean, the last series, Weirdmageddon, if that didn't get complaints from kids' parents, I don't know what would, really. But, again, it's kind of an anomaly.
Yeah, it is. I mean, if you look at something that has the potential to actually be a scary game for a kid, say the Ghostbusters franchise, yeah? The Ghostbusters video games aren't scary, they're just normal arcade games. It's a normal shooting arcade game.
It's a third-person cover shooter with ghosts.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's that one, there's the isometric kind of top-down version as well. If you look at something like Plants vs. Zombies, you've got zombies, which are supposed to be scary, but, you know, then you have the theme tune, there's a zombie.
Well, the Plants vs. Zombies is basically like there's a little football game or basketball game or hockey game, and the local team's mascot is a zombie, and they're the zombies that you play in that game. It's a mascot zombie. I'm not saying they should have like detached heads and entrails hanging out and all that sort of stuff, but you know, come on, treat kids with a little bit more. Plants vs. Zombies, it's mascots, it's so sanitized and fluffy. This is kids, right? When I was at school, primary school, whatever it's called, whatever country you're in, there was a game on Halloween that you did at school. There was a series of boxes, and in one box there was jelly. You put your hand in, you don't know what it is, you feel it, you go, ooh, gross. And, you know, there was a load of, like, boxes with holes in, that different things that felt weird.
Yeah.
Kids love doing gross stuff.
Yes, they do.
So where is this aspect of games that reflects that? I don't mean gross, like, gross for adults. There's, I think, different qualifiers for what classifies as gross for an adult and gross for a kid.
Yeah. Kids aren't afraid of things like, if you take bugs, right, insects, as an example, the majority of kids aren't afraid of spiders or beetles or caterpillars or anything like that. Take an adult, put them anywhere near a spider, majority of them will freak out and run.
I just don't know what to do with it, really. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to change, because I always use the example of movies as being the contemporary to video games. And when you look at what's been developed for kids in the space of sort of spooky Halloween stuff, it's that Castle Transylvania is the sort of the be-all and end-all of what is being used sort of within the horror realm for kids. And that's basically just mascots again.
Yeah, but this is the thing. It is a mascot game, per se, the game I'm thinking of, but it's not a mascot game in the same way that other mascots, and I'm thinking about Medievil.
Yeah, I mean, that was a perfect time for me. That I adored that. Absolutely love Medievil as a kid.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you played a dumb skeleton who had half of his face hanging off, and you went off and did goofy stuff, and you could change your heads for other heads.
Exactly.
And it's just silly. It's Nightmare on Elm Street. I always confuse those two. Nightmare on Elm Street and Nightmare Before Christmas. I always confuse them, and they couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Nightmare Before Christmas. It's that sort of aesthetic. And
that's the thing.
Kids don't find that scary. They find it fun.
Yeah. But the thing is, there are several games like that appeared on like the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and I think possibly even the PlayStation 3. Do you remember Gregory Horror Show?
Yeah, because it was weird as and it was freaky.
Yeah, but that's a game for kids, isn't it?
Theoretically.
And if I remember rightly, the age rating for Gregory Horror Show was 12.
Yeah.
Gregory Horror Show
had like a Nurse Ratchet crocodile character.
Yeah. And Gregory Horror Show was one of those bizarre games that was just... It was weird, as you say. It was freaky, as you say. But you know what? I kind of love that game. Because it wore its heart on its sleeve. It wasn't afraid to be weird and bizarre and freaky and twisted in certain ways. And I introduced my nephew to that game, right? When he was 10. And he said, "Are there any more games like this, Uncle?" You loved it.
Yeah, and shame that there isn't.
No.
I think it's one of the biggest oversights in games, really. I think it would make money, you know what I mean? I don't think survival horror is a series outside of your big franchise names, your Resident Evils and whatnot, that much of a money spinner.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a lot of money being made doing this for kids either, but at the same time, it doesn't need to be a game which costs £100 million.
Yeah.
At all. In fact, this is the sort of thing which, I know we said it before, how indie games are great because they basically pick up genres which have died and say, okay, we don't want that, we're going to make it a thing again. This is one of the balls which I think indie games have really dropped because I think they could do some interesting stuff with it. And there's degrees of it here and there, but it's using more childish designs to mask really dark storytelling.
And that's the thing. There's a game that I honestly cannot remember the name of the game, and I know that I've got it in my collection, which makes it worse me not being able to remember the name of the game. But you basically play as a little girl, and your enemies are your sisters, who are witches or demons or something like that, and you have to try and stop them. And you have like a scarf with like a hand on it that can grab things.
That sounds familiar.
A platform game. You know the one I'm talking about.
It's that the scarf with a hand. That's the bit that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was a scarf with a hand, and I cannot remember the name of the game. It was Demons something or Demons Out or something. I can't remember what it was, but that was a game that had very strong horror elements in the game, but it was very clearly a game aimed at kids.
Yeah, Google's not helping me.
Yeah, there's that. But then again, you've got other games like Grabbed by the Ghoulies. Which you know...
It's kind of the Gremlins mold, isn't it? That sort of title. The Ghoulies, Gremlins,
yeah.
Stuff like that.
And Grabbed by the Ghoulies was... that was just a straightforward action adventure. That came out from Rare, and that was the age rating for that game was 3, right? But this is very clearly a game with like huge horror elements in it.
Yeah, I wish we didn't do this episode now because it makes me really sad to think what could be and what isn't.
Yeah, it just seems like people have forgotten that it's okay for kids to play games that have horror elements. It's okay for kids to be scared of a video game. I mean, you know.
It's okay for kids to be scared.
Yeah.
And they like gross stuff. Of course they like gross stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't think they do, you don't know kids. And I get a feeling that's the case with a lot of video games development, especially where there's any sort of money involved. They don't really care what anybody wants. They just care where the money's being made at that specific moment in time. And if that money's not being made, they'll move on to the next thing.
Yeah. And
things that never get the light of day, never get the chance, to just assume, oh, that doesn't work, that doesn't make money, without even giving it a chance to make money, without giving it a chance to be the best it can be.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think the most disappointing thing with the modern video games industry for me is that they seem to have forgotten what it was like to be a kid. They're all so focused on developing what they think kids want rather than just kind of going out and asking kids.
I mean, the closest Sony have got to this is Concrete Genie, and that's horror in a sense of not so much spooky, but monsters. Kids love monsters as well, and like lovable monsters. And Concrete Genie is that, with a decent game, a decent story, and it's not just shovelware.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where it just kind of highlights that there are certain aspects of particular video games which you think, that'd make a great game for a kid.
Yeah, I mean, this episode... Oh, man, I wish I didn't think this episode at all. This really bummed me out. Oh, no. I think we've got to become game developers, Rob, and make these sorts of games. I think I found my calling. I have to do this. Because it is fair enough, though, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
How much kids... Just look at, like, Luigi's Mansion. That's a very popular game.
Yeah.
And that nobody thought, hang on, that game there, Luigi's Mansion, that's not just popular because it's Luigi. Luigi's not popular. He's Mario's brother. Nobody cares about Mario's brother. It's like saying Knuckles games or Tails. Nobody cares about Knuckles or Tails. It's about Mario or Sonic. So the only thing that you can take away from Luigi's Mansion success is it's the mansion part, not the Luigi part. And nobody's picked that up and thought, hang on, we could do something with that. We could make a version of that. We could do something with that. They basically just treat it like they always do. Because it's Nintendo, their success doesn't count as success. It counts as Nintendo success, which is its own little classification. It's not like Assassin's Creed success or Fortnite success. It's you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
It's the same with Animal Crossing as well. That's not treated as a success by people outside of the Nintendo bubble because, it's a Nintendo game. And I think overlooking things like that, which are what kids want, is just a failing of the video game industry when I think, honestly, there's so many things you could do with this. It's almost without limitation, really.
Yeah. Let's look at it this way. Psychonauts is getting a second game, okay? And Psychonauts, to me, is it's a prime example of a horror game for kids that hasn't died yet. It's still very much alive and kicking, and I'm really looking forward to the new game. I hope it recaptures what the original game did and builds on it.
It's supernatural more than horror, but, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a game that any age can play and understand, more importantly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the key things about any horror game for kids is not just being able to play the game, but being able to understand what the game's about and actually enjoying it because you understand what the game's about. So for me, Psychonauts might not be a horror game to everybody.
It's got horrific aspects. The first one had horrific aspects.
Yeah, it has horrific aspects, but that's the thing. If you're a kid, you'll find different things scary, as we've already established. And so what we might find scary, I would never let a kid play something like Resident Evil or Silent Hill or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think what passes as horror games that kids exposed to, horror game that kids are exposed to, is Five Nights at Freddy's, and that's not because of what it is or what it does. It's because it's popular on a platform which kids access games on, like Twitch,
YouTube, that sort of thing. Yeah, but this is the thing. Something like Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't class as a horror game.
It's not. It's basically, I don't know what it is, but it's just bugaboo.
It's a shock game. It does shock scares. That's it. It does shock scares, and that's all it does. It doesn't do anything other than jump scares, shock scares. That's it. But what you feel is the shock. It's not scary. It's not really anything. Once you got past the initial premise of it, oh look, I'm gonna have a jump scare from one of these robot things. Oh look, that's going to really, really affect me in horrible ways. I'm going to have nightmares about this and think about it for days. And I'm doing my monotone voice on purpose, by the way. I think that there is space, and you never know. The wheel might come around again. We might have an age where we get some really interesting games, some really interesting horror games again for kids. We might have echoes of Heart of Darkness or Evil Twin reappearing. And that Herdy Gerdy game from the PS2, I could never tell whether that was a serious game or a horror game or supposed to be a comedy, because it was a weird mashup of all of them.
And Medieval as well. There's pockets of history where this stuff was all over the place.
Yeah, and so it would be interesting to see that age reappear on the next-gen consoles. Maybe not in the AAA or mid-range developer space, but in the indie space.
I see no reason why it can't be in the mid-range.
It could be in the mid-range. I mean, Team 17, I'm looking at you in particular,
I don't think it has to be. I think it could be quite decently sized because studios could do this sort of stuff. Honestly,
they could. But I mean, if I was at the top of my list of developers, publishers who I would trust to be a kind of capture the essence of what we're talking about, Team 17 is there.
I'd put Obsidian in there too.
Obsidian, yeah, I'll go with Obsidian.
Yeah, because with the grounded stuff that they've done.
Yeah.
Whoever does Fable, that sort of has that same sort of mentality where it's kind of goofy, but it can also be spooky as well.
Was that not Lionhead, or was that...
it was Lionhead, but now it's Playground Games.
Yeah. See, the reason I went with Team 17 is anyone who can take just normal earthworms and turn them into one of the most fun tactical games on the planet.
Yeah, there's all sorts of people could do it. I don't think it's limited to studios that have a sense of humour, but I think that helps.
Yeah, I'm just saying it wasn't any other studio that did it except Team 17, though, was it?
Lots of people ripped it off, though. Oh,
true. Lots of people ripped it off.
Like Hogs of War. Remember Hogs of War? If you remember Hogs of War, comment below.
Oh, God, you seriously aged yourself.
Yeah, that's PlayStation 1. But yes, if you've got something to add to our conversation about how horror games can also be for kids too, and it's a crying shame that it's not, please do comment below to join our conversation. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you've liked the video, then give us a thumb, sub, or a bell. And if you want to support us, then you can check out our Patreon. The details are in the description below.
And that's all from Impossible Mission this week. Join us every Thursday for more video game chit-chat. Until next time, thanks for listening and watching.